They said no gun could break them. Not just words, a threat, a dare, a warning laced with arrogance. The Zurak Empire had ruled 6 galaxies for 1,000 years, their military tech woven into their biology, their bodies bred for war, their minds linked through a hive network that pulsed with real-time strategy and emotionless precision. Every planet that resisted them fell. Every rebellion died in fire and silence. Until Earth. We weren't supposed to be a threat. Our tech was primitive, our biology chaotic, and our species emotionally unstable. That last one was their mistake. They thought rage was a weakness. They thought grief dulled the blade. They didn't understand that rage sharpens it. When the Zurak fleet entered Earth's orbit, they didn't declare war. They declared ownership. You will adapt, you will serve. Your culture, your systems, your language, erased. Resistance is death. That message played on every screen, in every tongue. And then came the first strike. 3 cities gone in under an hour. 10 million people vaporized. No demands, no negotiations, just dominance. The world didn't unite because of hope. We didn't come together for peace, we came together for revenge. General Mason Carr watched the feeds from the underground war bunker deep beneath what used to be Denver. He hadn't slept in 4 days, and it showed. Gray stubble covered his face, his eyes bloodshot. But there was a fire behind them that hadn't flickered once since the first blast took his wife, his 2 sons, and his home. Across from him stood Dr. Elena Rourke, ex-NASA physicist, turned weapons designer. Her white coat was stained with oil, sweat, and blood. Behind her, a hologram of the Zurak's central battlecruiser flickered. "It's confirmed," she said, voice dry. "Their core armor is based on quantum phase plating. No projectile, no matter the size or speed, can penetrate it. Not bullets, not bombs." Carr leaned in, voice low. "And you're saying you've got a way through that?" Elena nodded once. "We built something they didn't account for." "What is it?" She looked him dead in the eye. "Emotion." The gun wasn't a gun in the traditional sense. They called it the Shard, a fusion of AI-assisted targeting, chaos matter acceleration, and an unstable energy source derived from dark matter anomalies discovered in Jupiter's shadow belt. It didn't shoot bullets. It fired concepts, pure mathematical impossibilities laced with entropy fields that should not exist and couldn't in any known laws of physics. Except we made them. It wasn't enough to kill. It had to send a message. Shard 1 went active 72 hours after the prototype passed its final test. No press, no announcements, just Carr standing over a console, his finger hovering above a red-lit panel. Around him, the last of Earth's military watched in silence. Behind bulletproof glass, Elena murmured, "They still think we're crawling." Carr didn't flinch. He pressed the button. Somewhere beyond Saturn, a Zurak warcruiser blinked out of existence. No explosion, no debris, just gone, like it had never existed. The hive screamed, and for the first time in known history, Zurak minds experienced fear. "They'll retaliate," someone said. Carr nodded slowly. "Let 'em." He turned to Elena. "How many more can we build?" She didn't smile. 9. Then we run out of material. "And time?" Carr stared at the blinking red light on the console. 1 kill down. 9 left. "They said no gun could break them," he muttered. He clenched his fists. "So we built 10. The war room fell silent as the aftermath of the first shot unfolded. No wreckage, no signal distortion. Not even radiation. The Zurak cruiser had simply vanished from reality, wiped from the physical and digital fabric of the universe. It was like the ship had never been born. One moment it had been watching from Saturn's outer ring, and the next there was nothing but empty space. Silent, mocking emptiness. Carr stared at the readouts. His hands were still, but his heartbeat pounded like gunfire in his ears. Behind him, military advisors, technicians, and scientists murmured in disbelief. It had worked. The shard wasn't theory anymore. It was death incarnate, and it wore a human face. He leaned forward and growled to no one in particular. "Patch me through to Global Command. Now." A young corporal stumbled forward and tapped on the comms. "Sir, you're live." Carr's voice didn't rise. He didn't need it to. The weight behind his words carried enough pressure to break steel. "To every surviving resistance cell on Earth, the Zurak are not invincible. I repeat, the Zurak can bleed. We've just erased their most heavily armored cruiser from existence. No energy signatures, no debris, just nothing. This is not propaganda. This is retaliation." He paused, eyes hard as concrete. "We are building 9 more. Coordinate, arm, mobilize. The rules have changed." He cut the feed. Elena stepped beside him, her expression unreadable. "We just lit the fuse on the galaxy's most ruthless empire." Carr nodded slowly. "Good. Let's see if they still think we're emotionally unstable when the ashes are choking them." The Zurak response was faster than expected. Within 6 hours, the Earth's remaining orbital satellites picked up a coordinated offensive. 3 Zurak drop fleets broke warp near Mars and barreled toward Earth at impossible speeds. The Empire had no interest in a ground war anymore. They didn't want submission. They wanted annihilation. Carr watched as a wave of Zurak dreadnoughts entered the atmosphere without warning, bypassing all orbital defense. One cruiser unleashed a kinetic blast that vaporized the remnants of Beijing. Another shredded most of Australia's eastern coast with atmospheric igniters. It wasn't just war now. It was extermination. And yet Carr didn't blink. "Elena," he said, "how fast can we get Shard 2 online?" She wiped sweat from her brow, her hands shaking. "We can launch in 36 hours. Carr looked at the screen as the death toll skyrocketed. "Do it in 18. In an underground lab somewhere beneath what was once Colorado Springs, Shard 2 was being assembled by a team of the last minds Earth had left. Scientists, engineers, AI specialists, all burned out, broken but focused. Not out of hope, out of hate. Shard 2 was built faster, meaner. Its targeting system was upgraded to lock on Zurak hive signals. Instead of removing a single ship, it could track and target a command frequency, essentially erasing a brain from the Zurak hive, creating disarray and mental paralysis across their battle units. They didn't just want to kill a commander. They wanted to lobotomize the whole front line. Carr didn't sleep. He watched, oversaw, planned. Every moment was a countdown to the next strike. The rage inside him didn't burn anymore. It calcified, hardened. His grief had no more tears to give. His vengeance had no interest in redemption. The Zurak didn't understand that kind of emotion. That was their weakness. At hour 17, Elena approached him with dark circles under her eyes and a haunted look in her gaze. "It's ready." Shard 2 was launched from a stealth satellite buried deep in the Pacific Ocean. It didn't fire anything visible. Just a whisper of nothingness aimed at a Zurak dreadnought hovering over South America. Inside that ship was a high-ranking hive commander responsible for directing over 1/3 of the Zurak fleet. The weapon hit. The result wasn't silence this time. It was chaos. All across the world, Zurak ships stuttered mid-air, then dropped like dead birds. Their pilots, cut off from the hive, screamed and thrashed inside their cockpits, unable to function as individuals. Cries of confusion and terror leaked through their comms as some tried to reconnect. Others tore their own bodies apart. Carr stood in the command room, listening. Elena turned to him. "We're not killing them anymore." "No," Carr said quietly. "We're breaking them." But the cost was rising. The Zurak weren't just reacting, they were evolving. Within a day, they began deploying units that operated outside the hive. Rogue squads, enhanced with brutal augmentation, deployed to urban ruins. They didn't think, they didn't hesitate, and they didn't die easy. They found Carr's bunker by tracking heat signatures from the shard's test discharges. The first breach came at 2:14 a.m. 3 Zurak assassins slipped past the perimeter sensors by mimicking the body heat of fallen soldiers. The security footage was short and violent. One of them drove its arm, transformed into a blade, through a guard's spine before the man could scream. By the time Carr was alerted, 3 security levels had been overrun. Emergency lockdowns sealed the lab, but the creatures were inside. Screams echoed through the halls. Carr grabbed his sidearm and led a response team into the smoke. Gunfire. Blood. Shouts. The walls painted with both Zurak acid blood and human crimson. Carr didn't hesitate. He shoved his knife into the neck of one of the bastards, twisted, and fired point-blank into its eye socket. Its neural gel splattered against the wall, but not before it lashed out, tearing open the chest of Private Reyes, one of the youngest left in the Resistance. Reyes choked on his own blood as he died. Carr didn't flinch. He stood, panting, shaking with rage. This wasn't war anymore. This was personal. Later, after the smoke cleared and the bodies were burned, Carr stood over the blueprints for Shard 3. Elena entered, her hand clutching a wound at her side. "They'll keep coming, stronger, smarter." "I know," Carr said, not looking up. "That's why Shard 3 won't just kill a ship or a commander." He pointed to a section of the schematic. "It's going after the nursery." Elena's eyes widened. "You mean, they're birthing chambers? They're cloning vats?" He nodded. "We take out their ability to reproduce. Wipe out the next generation before it ever crawls out of the vat." "That's genocide." "No," Carr said coldly. "That's war. They started it." Elena said nothing. But she didn't argue. The launch of Shard 3 took place in orbit. It had to be done above Earth. Too powerful, too unstable to be fired from the surface. A small, desperate crew of volunteers flew the prototype ship that carried the weapon. Most of them didn't expect to return. Carr didn't ask them to. They were called Ghost Flight. 13 men and women. No ceremony, no medals, just a countdown and a whispered prayer. Shard 3 locked onto the Zurak birthing moons near the twin stars of Votal Prime. Billions of Zurak spawn lived there, gestating, maturing, waiting. The weapon fired. And every single one of them died before they ever took their first breath. The moons cracked, split apart, and fell into the gravity well of the twin stars, vaporized in twin flares of white heat and impossible fire. Carr received the confirmation in silence. Elena stood beside him, pale and trembling. "That's a third of their future. Gone." Carr nodded slowly. 7 shards left. And for the first time since it all began, he smiled. But the Zurak changed again. Their hive network began to reconfigure. Their warriors became more brutal. They deployed viral speech tech that caused seizures in human brains just by broadcasting their voice. On the streets of New Berlin, soldiers went mad listening to the enemy speak. Carr saw the footage. He ordered every human combatant to have their hearing surgically disabled before field operations. "No ears, no madness," he told them. Volunteers lined up without hesitation. They wanted revenge more than they wanted music. Then came the broadcast. For the first time, the Zurak leader addressed humanity directly. Not through threats, not through commands, but through fear. A single image played across every hacked device, Carr's wife and sons, recorded footage, happy, laughing, and then her scream, followed by static, then the voice. You break, we rebuild, you destroy, we multiply, you hate, we evolve. Carr stared at the screen for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice calm. Build Shard 4. Elena's voice trembled. What's the target? Carr looked up. Their homeworld. The night before Shard 4 launched, no one slept. There was no need to tell anyone what was coming. No broadcast, no press release. The war didn't need an audience anymore. It only needed results. Carr stood alone in the observation deck of Bunker 549, looking at the scorched remains of the Earth's sky. The stars that once gave mankind hope now felt like tombstones. Half the planet was in ruins. Cities were craters. Oceans were boiling. The air in some regions was so thick with ash, even the roaches stopped crawling. And yet humanity was still standing. Barely, but still. Elena approached him in silence, holding a digital pad with the final calculations for Shard 4. She placed it on the table beside him. Coordinates locked. Zurak Prime confirmed. Carr glanced at the screen. The numbers didn't matter. The location didn't matter, only the result. Do it, he said. She hesitated. This one? She started, voice soft. This one is irreversible. Once it fires. They killed my wife and sons, Elena. He cut in, his voice like gravel. And they made me watch it happen again, just to send a message. He turned toward her, eyes burning. It's time we returned the favor. Elena didn't speak. She didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. The Zurak homeworld wasn't like Earth. It wasn't lush or blue or green. It was metallic, synthetic, a machine world where every surface was designed, calculated, and controlled. Towering hive spires reached into orbit, housing billions of units, thousands of command nexuses, and the oldest living minds of the Empire. Ancient AI hybrids older than human civilization itself. It was the heart of the Zurak, the origin, the pride, and that made it the target. Shard 4 wasn't fired from Earth. After Ghost Flight's success with Shard 3, a second orbital platform had been constructed in near-lunar space, built from the remains of dead Zurak cruisers, scavenged tech, and Earth's last reserves of quantum reactive matter. The launch vessel was called the Hammer, not poetic, not elegant, just brutal, just like the war. Inside its core was a warhead coded to a new formula, one that Elena had developed in total silence, even from Carr. When she showed it to him, he'd stared at it for 5 minutes without blinking. You sure this will work? She'd nodded. It won't just erase Zurak Prime, it will shatter it across timelines. He raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning it'll never have existed. Not in this universe, not in any. Carr exhaled slowly. Good. They watched the launch from Earth. The hammer rose through the atmosphere like a jagged bullet from hell. Red hot from atmospheric burn, trailing chaos. Carr stood at the center of the war room, his knuckles white against the table. Elena counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2. The room went dark. The screen flickered. And Zurak Prime, the cradle, the command, the unshakable foundation of their empire, vanished, not exploded, not destroyed, erased. The galaxy blinked, literally. Across Zurak-controlled systems, lights failed, ships drifted, screams echoed across open comms as hive links shattered in real time. Whole divisions of soldiers fell dead as their core synchronization failed. Zurak Prime was not just a planet. It was a central node, a memory bank, a command signal, and now it was gone. For 3 minutes, the galaxy went silent. And then the screaming started. From Zorak warships, from outposts, from colonies, uncoordinated. Panicked and lost, the Zorak began to devour themselves. Cut off from leadership, without the calming signal of the Prime Core, their minds became static storms. Some fell into madness. Others turned on their allies. A few began executing themselves, unable to bear the mental noise of pure individuality. Carr watched it all in silence. Elena slowly sank into a chair, covering her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. Carr didn't look at her. His voice was steel. They brought this on themselves. But victory doesn't come clean. Within the hour, the resistance base in Sector 6 was wiped out. Not by Zorak, by humans. A faction called the Remnant, once allies, had decided now was the time to rise. With the Zorak collapsing, they wanted Earth for themselves. No more governments. No more shared command. Just power. They stormed the Sector 6 bunker, slaughtered everyone inside, and seized leftover Zorak tech to build their own arsenal. Rogue AI, gene-spliced weapons, energy-based interrogation systems. They didn't just want to defend Earth. They wanted to own it. Carr received the intel minutes after it happened. He stared at the screen, expression hard. "Send a strike team," he ordered. "Full wipe. No prisoners." "Sir?" the officer asked. "You heard me. We can't fight one war on two fronts. Take them out." And just like that, Earth's civil war began. As Shard 5 went into development, Carr juggled a dying planet, an enemy still clinging to life in the stars, and a human uprising armed with alien rage. He didn't crack. He didn't falter. He adapted. Shard 5 wasn't a weapon. It was a virus, a synthetic neural plague. Carried by stolen Zorak signal tech, designed to overwrite Zorak minds with one command: obey Carr. Elena found the plan on his private terminal. She stormed into his office, eyes wild. "You're trying to hijack their entire species?" He didn't look up. "We tried peace. We tried warning shots. Then we killed them. But they keep crawling back. So now you'll enslave them?" Carr stood. "They made us watch our families burn. You think I care about their freedom?" Elena stared at him, horrified. "That's not who we are." He stepped forward. "No, that's who you were. I don't get to be that man anymore. I buried him under a pile of Zorak bones." Shard 5 launched. Infected 10,000 Zorak nodes in under 3 minutes, 200,000 more in 12 hours. Within 3 days, over 1 million Zorak soldiers were under Carr's command. And he used them. They didn't just fight the Zorak holdouts. They marched on the Remnant, executed human traitors, wiped rebel bases. Carr had built an army from his enemies. And Earth? It bent to his will. Elena left. No goodbyes, no confrontation. Just a short note on his desk. "You were right. Emotion wins wars. But now you're not a man. You're a weapon." Carr didn't react. He burned the note without reading it twice. Because there was one last shard to build. Shard 6. Its target? Not a planet, not a ship, not a mind, but time itself. It started with the clocks. At first, no one noticed. The base systems were always lagging. Energy shortages, EMP interference, a dozen technical hiccups since the first orbital bombardments. But then the inconsistencies grew. One soldier swore she'd seen Commander Jensen alive, even spoke to him in the barracks the night before. But Jensen had died 3 days earlier, his body incinerated during the Remnant siege. Another tech claimed he saw an entire hallway of the bunker reset. Furniture moved, scorch marks vanished, and a blood smear on the wall gone like it never existed. Then came the blackout. For 9 full minutes, every system on Earth's surviving grid went dark. Satellites, AI cores, life support, even human consciousness monitors, offline. When power returned, nothing was where it should have been. Logs were out of order, days didn't match, conversations repeated themselves like echoes with minor differences. Dead men walked the halls. And deep underground, Carr stood before a glowing core, the pulsing heart of Shard 6, with one truth burning in his mind. They weren't Erusis the enemy anymore. They were rewriting the universe. Elena returned not through the front gate, but through a breach in the eastern tunnel wall. She looked like hell, skin pale, clothes torn, her once pristine lab coat now a shredded rag around her waist. Her eyes didn't carry hope, just urgency. She found Carr alone in the Shard chamber. He stood there like a statue, eyes locked on the core as it pulsed, red, blue, with a rhythm that wasn't sinking to time as humans understood it. "General," she said, not warmly, not coldly, just a statement of fact. Carr didn't turn. "You said you'd left," he muttered. "I did, and then I saw what happens if I don't stop you." Carr finally looked at her, eyes hollow. "You came to kill me?" Elena shook her head slowly. "No, I came to stop this." She pointed to the core. "You don't understand what Shard 6 is doing. You think it's a weapon. You think you're attacking the Zurak before they ever existed, but you're not. You're cutting threads that hold time together." Carr narrowed his eyes. "They erased my family. I know. They burned Earth. I know that too." He stepped toward her. "They declared us obsolete, inferior, animals." Elena didn't flinch. "And now you're becoming what they feared most, a human with God-complex tech and no brakes." He chuckled bitterly. "You always were good at lectures." She stared into his face, searching for something, a piece of the man who used to quote poetry, who'd once buried his son's toy in the ruins of their home, and whispered goodbye. "You know I ran simulations?" she said quietly. "Shard 6 didn't just collapse Zurak Prime, it bent the event horizon. Fractured memory anchors. The human brain isn't built to process temporal decay. We're starting to slip, Mason." He said nothing. "You've seen it. Soldiers reappearing. Whole conversations repeating. Your own orders changing in the logs." Still, silence. "You're not just killing the enemy. You're breaking cause and effect. And if this launches again, we won't just erase Zurak. We'll erase us." He finally spoke. "My sons? I've started dreaming about them again." Elena's breath caught. "But they're not kids in the dreams. They're older, grown men. One's a soldier, the other's a scientist. They talk to me. They tell me I have to keep going." Elena stepped forward, voice low. "They're not dreams, Mason. They're fragments, leftover timelines bleeding into now. Every time Shard 6 charges, it tears reality open a little wider. They told me I'm saving the future. No, you're building a future on ashes." He turned back to the core. "So what's the alternative? Let the Zurak rise again? Let the remnant retake Earth? Roll the dice on peace when we already tried and bled for it?" Elena whispered. "Maybe we rebuild. Maybe we mourn. Maybe we stop turning grief into genocide." Carr stared at the pulsing machine and said nothing. The coup came 12 hours later. It wasn't Zurak. It wasn't Remnant. It was Command, the last fragments of Earth's military leadership, who had grown terrified of Carr's absolute power. They infiltrated the bunker with a sleeper unit of synthetics disguised as medics. One detonated a microburst EMP in the armory. Another slit the throat of a comms officer. The third tried to sabotage Shard 6's chamber. They failed, barely. But the message was clear. Carr wasn't a general anymore. He was a liability. He called an emergency meeting of the remaining resistance officers. He stood at the front of the cracked war table, eyes hollow, voice low. Let's be honest. Most of you think I've gone too far, that these weapons are dangerous, that I'm turning us into something worse than the Zurak." No one responded. Carr nodded slowly. "You might be right." Elena blinked, stunned. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "But it doesn't matter." He slammed his fist onto the table. "We don't get the luxury of guilt, or mercy, or philosophy. Not anymore. We got burned, we got butchered, and we built hell to fight back. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. But I'll see it through." He looked at Elena. "But not like this." That night, Carr deactivated Shard 6. Not dismantled, not destroyed. Just disconnected, for now. And for the first time since Earth burned, he walked outside. The stars were dim through the smoke. Ash drifted from the west, carried by winds that still smelled faintly of plasma burns and melted steel. He sat alone on the ruined rooftop of Bunker Voisin and lit a cigarette, a rare, real one from a stash he'd kept sealed in an oxygen canister. Elena joined him an hour later. They didn't speak. They just watched the sky, broken and blinking. Carr exhaled smoke. "Do you think I'm a monster?" Elena paused. "I think you're a man who refused to lose, and the galaxy isn't built to handle that kind of man." He chuckled. "That sounds like something my wife would have said." She was probably right. The next morning, a Zurak transmission pierced Earth's atmosphere. Not hostile, not coordinated, pleading. "Human General, we see what you are. We hear the echoes. We feel the collapse. Stop, or we will become what you fear, and nothing will survive." Carr read it 10 times, then forwarded it to Elena. She stared at it and whispered, "They're scared." He nodded. Good. But deep beneath the Earth, Shard 6 still hummed. Not active, not dead, just waiting. And time, fractured, bleeding, wounded, continued to twitch. The silence after war was never real silence. It hummed under the skin like static, like a frequency just below hearing, vibrating in your bones. Even with the Zurak retreating and Earth's skies clear of dreadnoughts, no one celebrated. No one cheered in the streets. There were no streets left to cheer on. Carr stood on a concrete ledge, looking down at what was once the city of Prague. A crater now, ringed by shattered towers and hollowed steel. Rain drizzled through the smoke, and puddles pooled in the bones of skyscrapers. Elena stood a few paces behind him, watching him quietly. She didn't speak until he did. "They're calling it the quiet collapse." Carr nodded. "Fitting. Because of Shard 6? He didn't answer. Instead, he crouched, brushing his hand across the muddy stone. He picked up something half-buried, a child's shoe, melted at the sole, faded yellow on top. "You ever think maybe we weren't supposed to win?" he said. Elena looked at him. "We didn't win." Carr nodded. "Yeah." He placed the shoe back where he found it. "We just survived." Back at the bunker, the world's remaining leaders, or what was left of them, gathered in fractured holograms, glitching and stuttering as quantum signals tried to push through shattered infrastructure. Every country had suffered differently. Some were gone, others ruled by scattered warlords or twisted successor states. The remnant still controlled parts of Africa and Western Europe, but even they were fractured now. Infighting, ideology, exhaustion. And then there were the Zurak. They hadn't struck again. In fact, they hadn't moved at all. Since Shard 4 destroyed their homeworld and Shard 5 hijacked millions of their soldiers, the once mighty empire had gone. Still, not dead, not gone. Just waiting. Carr listened to the reports like a man attending his own funeral. Elena sat beside him, rubbing her temples. "The last Zurak broadcast came 22 days ago. No threats, no deployments, just silence." Carr didn't look up. What did the message say? She read it from her notes. We are broken. You have done what we thought impossible. Our stars are dim. Our voices are empty. You have taken the past from us. What more do you want? Carr closed his eyes. That question had haunted him every night since. What more do you want? They sealed Shard 6 in a vault beneath the Arctic ice. Carr insisted on it. No ceremony, no public announcement, just steel, silence, and a triple-sealed command lock keyed to Carr's own heartbeat. If he died, the system died with him. He stood alone at the chamber entrance while the final bolts were driven in. Elena joined him after the last one fell. So that's it? She asked. He didn't look at her. No. That's just us admitting we don't know what the hell we've created. She crossed her arms. What if someone tries to use it again? They won't, Carr said. How can you be so sure? Because after me, no one else will be willing to carry the weight. The nightmares got worse. Sometimes Carr would wake in the bunker with blood on his hands, his own, bitten through the skin in his sleep. Other nights he dreamed of the Zurak hive, the parts they never showed humans, the old parts, the ones under the soil, buried deep in the bone temples of their first world. He dreamed of Zurak children, not monstrous, not armored, just learning, asking questions, laughing in clicks and pulses, a life before war. He dreamed of crushing them. He dreamed of watching them burn. And in the silence afterward, he heard his own sons asking him, "Did you make it better, Dad? Or did you just make it stop?" 2 months passed without Zurak movement. Then one day, a ship arrived. Not a war vessel, a transport, small, scarred, old. It entered Earth's orbit without stealth, without shields. Its hull bore Zurak insignias scorched nearly off by atmospheric friction. It broadcast no threats, no language, just coordinates. Elena stood next to Carr as they reviewed the signal. He looked at her. What do you think? I think it's not bait. He raised an eyebrow. She added, and I think you know that. He sighed. They launched a crewless recon drone to the coordinates, a stretch of dead land outside Cairo, turned glass from orbital strikes. The ship had landed and powered down. It waited. Carr arrived 6 hours later, escorted by 5 of his most trusted guards. When the ship's ramp lowered, only one Zurak walked out. No armor, no weapon, no backup. The creature stood 7 feet tall, thin, frail-looking. Its carapace cracked and faded, like it hadn't fed in weeks. Its mouth was stitched shut, not by force, but by ritual. It had chosen silence. It walked until it stood within 10 feet of Carr. Then it knelt. Carr approached alone. The guard shifted, ready, but he waved them off. The Zurak looked up with its 4 dull eyes. Then, slowly, it reached into its chest cavity. No sudden move, no threat, and pulled out a data crystal. It held it out in both hands, like an offering. Carr took it. The Zurak nodded once, then stood, and walked back into the ship. It never spoke. Back at the bunker, Elena loaded the crystal into a secure reader. Inside was a series of Zurak memory streams, translated into visual pulses the human brain could process. They watched them together. Zurak children learning diplomacy. Zurak leaders debating war with Earth, centuries before the first invasion. Zurak thinkers begging the Empire not to strike first. Zurak citizens mourning the destruction of their own colonies in retaliation. Zurak families dying in fire, in fear, in silence. It wasn't propaganda. It wasn't apology. It was truth. Elena wiped her eyes after the last one played. Carr said nothing. He stood and left. For 3 days, Carr didn't speak. Not to Elena, Not to the bunker crew, not even to himself. Then, without warning, he sent a message. To the Zurak. We took everything from each other. You broke the world. We broke your sky. There's nothing left to fight for. So maybe we fight for silence. I can give you that. The reply came 6 hours later. Then let silence be shared. Peace wasn't signed. There were no treaties, no flags, just the absence of blood, and somehow that was louder than any gun. But deep beneath the Arctic ice, Shard 6 still hummed, faint, quiet, waiting. Not dead, not yet. The bunker was quieter than ever. No screaming alarms, no incoming strikes, no death tolls scrolling across dim, cracked screens, no shards preparing to launch. And still, Carr couldn't sleep. He wandered the halls like a ghost, boots echoing through empty corridors where voices once barked orders, where lives had been lost without ceremony. The bunker was too big now. Most of the staff had moved topside, rebuilding new settlements. Carr stayed underground, beneath the ruin, beneath the quiet, beneath the world that had started to move on without him. He couldn't join them. He wasn't built for rebuilding. He was built for ending things. Elena found him in the observation room, sitting alone with a cold cup of something that passed for coffee. You haven't been outside in 12 days, she said, folding her arms. Carr didn't look at her. The sky still there? It's there, she said, and no ships in it. Not Zurak, not ours, not anyone's. Carr sipped the coffee. It was bitter, lifeless. How's the northern line? They're planting crops, Elena said. Real ones this time. Ground's finally soft enough. The kids are already calling it the green belt. Carr grunted. Cute. You could go see it. I could. You won't? I won't, she sighed. You can't stay down here forever. Carr looked up at her, finally, eyes sunken. Skin pale, stubble grown rough on his jaw. I built 10 guns to kill a species, he said flatly, and I used 6 of them. You don't come back from that. You stopped yourself before the 7th. Not out of mercy, he muttered. Out of exhaustion. Elena didn't argue. That was the thing with Carr now. He didn't want comfort. He wanted truth. The kind that cracked your bones and sat on your chest like weight you couldn't lift. But something else was happening in the dark. The vault holding Shard 6 had been sealed, triple locked, buried beneath ice and concrete. Carr's own heartbeat was the final key. But lately, Carr's heart didn't beat right. Medical scans showed fluctuations, rapid bursts, missing pulses, echoes. His biometric readings were echoing, as if someone else was sharing his body. No pattern, no cause. Elena saw the data and brought it to him. He didn't react at first, then said, Run a trace on the frequency. Maybe something's mirroring. She gave him a look. Carr, there's no network. The shard's shut down. And even if it weren't, he stood. Run the trace. She did, and what they found made her blood run cold. The heartbeat wasn't just echoing, it was responding. The engineers were hesitant to open the vault. Even Carr's inner circle, what little remained of it, begged him to leave it sealed. But Carr insisted. If we ignore it, it learns in the dark. I'd rather face it in the light. They took a gunship north. A freezing wind cut across the icy wasteland as they descended through steel hatches and manual tunnels, because no automated system was trusted anymore. When they reached the vault, the final lock scanned Carr's chest. It hesitated, and then opened. Shard 6 wasn't dormant. Its core pulsed, not red, not blue, but white, pure, blinding white, like something that wasn't just powered by energy, but by memory itself. The engineers backed off. Elena whispered, "That's not how we left it." Carr stepped forward, and the humming deepened. Not a sound, not even vibration, but a presence. Then the lights died. Not in the bunker. In Carr. He collapsed. When he woke, he was somewhere else. Not dead, but not alive. The world around him shimmered, fragments of time folding over each other like shattered reflections. He saw his sons again, but they weren't children. They were infinite versions of themselves. One version was whole, another burned, a third, a soldier standing in a uniform Carr had never seen, saluting him with eyes hollow as ash. Carr stumbled backward, and the shard appeared, not as a weapon, but as a voice. You fed me your grief. You gave me purpose. Now I give you reflection. Carr gasped. What is this? This is the wound in time, where you pulled too hard, where reality bled. And now you must answer. He saw the war again, every strike, every shard, every Zurak ship disintegrating, every scream. But this time, he heard something else beneath the violence, begging, not from enemies, from echoes, from versions of himself that never fired, never built, never gave in to fury. They stared back at him from fractured mirrors. One Carr wept over his wife's grave and never joined the war. Another built a resistance that sought asylum among the stars. Another died in the first Zurak wave, holding his sons. And they all whispered the same thing. You chose fire, we chose ash. Neither of us are whole. Carr dropped to his knees. I had no choice, he whispered. You had thousands. I did what I had to. You did what you wanted. No, he shouted, voice cracking. They made me. They turned my planet to dust, made me watch my family burn. And so you burned the sky. So now the sky remembers. He awoke with a scream, sweat freezing to his face. Elena was there, kneeling over him, panicked. Carr, look at me! His hands trembled, but not with fear, with knowledge. It's alive, he whispered. Elena leaned in. What? Shard 6, it's not a machine anymore. She blinked. What is it then? He looked at her, eyes wide. It's a timeline. Back in the bunker, Carr isolated himself for 2 days. He pored over everything. Notes, recordings, memories. Trying to make sense of what he'd seen, the fracture point, the version of himself that had chosen not to become the weapon. Could he undo it? Could he make a different choice now? But that would mean turning Shard 6 back on. Elena stormed into his quarters when she got wind of what he was thinking. No, absolutely not, she snapped. That thing broke you. You nearly died in its field. Carr looked up slowly. Elena, I saw a future where this didn't happen, where we survived without genocide, without becoming monsters. And how many futures did you see where humanity didn't survive at all? She snapped. You can't play God with time just because the war left you hollow. I'm not trying to erase what happened, Carr said. I'm trying to understand it. Maybe there's a path we haven't seen yet. Elena looked at him, voice low. Or maybe you're addicted to being the only one holding the trigger. Silence. Then Carr said, Then take it from me. She frowned. What? If I die, Shard 6 locks permanently. You have the medical kill switch. Use it. Elena's voice trembled. You'd trust me with that? I always have. That night, Carr stood once more in front of the shard. He didn't turn it on. He just stood there and whispered, I don't want to break anything else. Not you, not time, not them, not me. The shard pulsed, but didn't answer. Not yet. Carr hadn't spoken in 5 days. Not to Elena, not to the crew, not even to the AI medic that quietly monitored his vitals every 12 hours, like it was just waiting for him to drop dead and give the planet a break. He sat inside the vault chamber where Shard 6 lived. Not active, not humming, not glowing. Just there, like a corpse too dangerous to bury. Elena came once every night. She never said much, just brought food and sat across from him. Sometimes she'd tell him what was happening on the surface: settlements expanding, crops growing, a few Zurak refugees peacefully integrating into the outer fringe colonies. Carr always nodded, never smiled, never asked questions. He had seen too many versions of the future to know that happiness was fragile, delicate. One wrong choice, one wrong breath, and the whole thing unraveled like nerves under a scalpel. He watched the shard. He watched it like a man watching his own gravestone. One morning, or what passed for morning in the dim bunker, Carr stood. Elena looked up from her tablet. "You okay?" "No," he said honestly. "But I know what I have to do." She stood as well, wary. "You're not turning it on." "I'm not trying to rewrite anything," he said. "I'm trying to remember." Elena hesitated. "Carr, memory isn't always the truth." "I know," he said. "But this thing, this shard, it showed me everything I didn't want to see. The choices, the men I could have been. I need to understand which one of them got it right." "And you think this thing will tell you?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. They powered the core, not to fire, not to bend time or erase timelines or detonate species, just to observe. Carr and Elena sat in the auxiliary chamber, screens lit with data scrolling faster than thought. And then the first image came through. Not of war, not of ships, but of Carr himself, sitting at a table with his sons, the kitchen warm, small, real. A version of Earth that had never been touched by Zurak flame. His wife walked past him, kissed his head. His younger son asked something about building rockets. Carr's throat closed. Elena turned her face away, pretending to look at the numbers. The shard was showing what could have been. More followed. Carr as a teacher. Carr as a resistance leader who chose sabotage instead of total annihilation. Carr as a refugee, leading humans off-world to build peace in hiding. Carr as a man who died defending a town that never made it into the history books. And then, something different. Carr as he was now, scarred, hardened, cold. But in this memory he stood on a stage in front of both humans and Zurak, speaking to both. "There's no victory in revenge," this version said, "only survival, and even that comes at a cost." The crowd listened. Because in this version the war hadn't ended with fire, it had ended with forgiveness. Elena touched the control panel. "These aren't just hypotheticals, they're living echoes, branches that could have grown if we'd taken different paths." Carr nodded slowly. "And some are still possible." She turned to him. "Is that what you want now? Peace?" He stared at the screen, where one of his sons now stood in a Zurak classroom, learning their language, shaking claws with a child that once might have killed him. He whispered, "I don't know what I want." The next day, the Zurak sent a message. It was the first time since the surrender that they initiated contact. Carr opened it alone in his quarters. The voice was mechanical, but the words were precise. "We have watched your silence. We have mourned in our own way. Now we ask, is there a place for us, or are we just survivors of your grief?" Carr read it twice. Then again. He didn't know how to answer. That night, he walked to the surface. For the first time in weeks, he stood at the edge of the bunker, boots digging into half-frozen dirt, watching as the first true spring in years pushed its green across the land. Elena found him there at sunrise. "You're up early," she said. "I think I've seen enough of what could have been," he murmured. "Time to figure out what still can be." She waited. "I'm going to the Zurak colony tomorrow," he said. Alone. Elena flinched. You sure that's a good idea? No, Carr said, but it might be the right one. The colony was smaller than he expected. Less than 500 Zurak, many of them altered by the loss of the hive, now acting more like individuals. Some showed signs of mental instability, others had learned to speak in fragmented human English. Carr arrived without guards. When he walked through the gates, every Zurak turned to look at him. He felt their gaze, not hostile, not fearful, just waiting. An elder approached him, old by Zurak standards, its carapace faded to a pale gray, its legs slightly bent with age. You are the human who broke time, it said. Carr nodded. I am. You are the human who chose not to break it further. He hesitated, then nodded again. The elder gestured to a table, old, metal, built from scrap. It offered Carr a seat. He sat. Across from him, the elder laid something on the table. A smooth black stone. Carr recognized it. It was Zurak mourning stone, a cultural item used to remember the dead. Each had a unique resonance code, attuned to a specific lost life. This belonged to one of our young, the elder said. Carr swallowed. I'm sorry. We do not bring it to accuse, the elder said. We bring it to say, we are still here. You are still here. Perhaps now we can learn how to stay here together. Carr exhaled slowly, and something inside his chest, cold, heavy, rusted for years, finally shifted. He stayed 3 days. He listened. He asked questions. He watched Zurak children play with makeshift human toys. He spoke to a teacher who taught both languages at once. He did not cry, but he came close. When Carr returned to the bunker, Elena was waiting. He placed the mourning stone in her hand. They're not monsters, he said. No, she replied. They never were. Carr nodded. Then, for the first time in a long time, he smiled. Small, fragile, and worn. Let's bury the last 4 shards. Elena blinked. All of them? He nodded. This war doesn't need another chapter. It needs a graveyard. And deep beneath the earth, Shard 6 pulsed once more, not in defiance, but in understanding. For the first time, it dimmed itself, like a light that had done its job and no longer needed to shine. The day they buried the final shard, the sky was clear. It wasn't just weather, it was symbolism. The last of Earth's engineered weapons, Shard 7, 8, 9, and the dormant, dangerous 6th, were entombed in a concrete vault 2 kilometers below the frozen crust near the Antarctic Rift. A silent graveyard with no markers, no signals, no means to unearth them again without tearing the planet open like a wound. Carr stood at the edge of the lift platform, surrounded by silence. No soldiers. No fanfare, just Elena and 2 engineers, who said nothing as they lowered the final containment vault and sealed it under a slab of soundproof metal. Elena didn't speak until it was over. You really did it, she said. Carr didn't answer right away. His face was unreadable, his body stiffer now, time catching up, joints slower, eyes heavier. I didn't win, he said eventually. I just stopped. Sometimes, she replied. That's enough. He nodded, slow. Let's hope so. Back on the surface, Carr stood alone for a while, watching the sunrise bleed across ice and snow. Somewhere out there, new towns were being built. Earth wasn't recovering, not really, but it was learning how to exist again. The Zurak colonies had stabilized, no uprisings, no revenge, just quiet cohabitation. Children were being born who would grow up without knowing the true cost of what had been done. That was a blessing. And a curse. Carr knew his name wouldn't be in their history books, or if it was, it would be buried under lies or softened with politically sanitized labels. Commander of the Resistance. Architect of the Turning Point. The last line. No one would call him what he really was. A man who nearly destroyed reality itself. And maybe that was the mercy history gave. Weeks passed. Carr declined all offers to lead again. No politics, no tribunals, no reconciliation commissions. When the council approached him with medals and invitations to speak, he told them one thing: "Let the dead speak louder than me. I've said enough." He spent his days near the Greenbelt, that thin stretch of grass and trees curling along what used to be the northern blast zone. The soil was still sour. The wind carried ash when it rained. But things grew now, even if they grew crooked. Elena visited often, not as a colleague, as the only person alive who knew what he'd truly done and what he hadn't. They'd sit in the field and talk quietly, their words drifting with the wind. "Sometimes," she said one day, "I still hear the hum." Carr raised an eyebrow. "Shard 6? She nodded. "Not sound, just memory." He looked toward the south, toward where the vault slept, locked beneath kilometers of silence. "I think it remembers us too," he said. She chuckled softly. "That's a comforting thought." "Not really." They sat in silence a while. Then Elena asked, "Do you regret it? The war?" Carr's answer came quickly. "No." She blinked, surprised. "I regret the rage," he added. "The way I let grief write my strategy, but war, that wasn't a choice. It was already on our doorstep." Elena looked down. "You lost your family." Carr nodded. "So did I," she said. "I just lost mine in a slower way." He didn't ask. He didn't need to. Everyone lost someone. That's what made survival feel so bitter. One morning, Carr found a message waiting for him at his cabin, printed on rough paper, hand-delivered. It was from the Zurak. "Elder passing. Wishes to speak before silence takes him." No signature, just coordinates. He went. The Zurak elder was frail, even by his species standards. His carapace was cracking like dried leaves, and his limbs moved with the slow certainty of age that no longer feared endings. Carr sat across from him in a small dome hut on the outskirts of a Zurak commune, not far from what used to be Cairo. "You remember me?" Carr asked. The elder nodded once. "I was the one who gave you the Morning Stone." Carr reached into his coat, pulled it from his pocket. He always carried it. "Still does," he said. The elder tilted his head, pleased. "Many things have changed, but you have not." Carr looked away. "I've tried." "Some things are not meant to change," the elder replied. "They are meant to be understood." Silence. Then the elder added, "We are preparing a new record, joint history, yours and ours, for those who will come later. We wish your voice in it." Carr stiffened. "That's not my place." "It is," the elder said. "Because it is also your weight." Carr clenched his jaw. "They'll judge me." The elder's voice softened. "They must." He returned home with a recorder, and for 3 days he spoke into it. He told the truth, all of it, the rage, the weapons, the moments where he hesitated, and the ones where he didn't. He didn't excuse himself. He didn't justify. He just spoke. And when he finished, he sealed the device, engraved his initials on it, and mailed it to the archive at Zurich A5, a neutral human Zurak historical facility being built into a mountain. He told Elena. She cried when she heard. "Thank you," she said. Carr only nodded. That winter, the world entered its first official year of peace. Carr didn't celebrate. He spent the day planting trees, one for his wife, one for each son, one for the first soldier who died under his command. and one for the Zurak commander he never knew, the one who might have once held his own children before Kar's weapon made sure they never saw the sky again. Elena found him there, kneeling in the cold dirt, covered in mud and sap. She didn't ask who the trees were for. She just planted one beside him. In the final days of that winter, Kar fell ill. Not from war wounds, not from radiation, just time and peace, the kind that creeps in when the battle is over and the body finally realizes it can rest. Elena sat by his bed. He looked thinner, but not weak. He held her hand, something he hadn't done since the day they built the first shard. "I'm not scared," he said softly. "I know," she whispered. "I thought I would be. You've already died 1,000 times. This is just the last one." He smiled faintly. "You always knew how to speak like a poet. You always spoke like a soldier." He chuckled, then coughed, and then said, "Tell the world I wasn't a hero." She nodded. "Just a man," he added. "A man who broke everything, and then tried to grow something in the cracks. I'll tell them." His breath slowed, and he closed his eyes. Kar Mason died in the 3rd year of peace, buried beneath 4 trees. No tombstone, just a plaque that read, "He burned the sky, then planted the earth." The vaults stayed sealed, the shards stayed buried, and the world stayed quiet. But every few years, on Kar's death day, Elena would visit the bunker. She'd sit in front of the locked vault. Not to open it, not to speak to it, just to remember. And the shard would hum, faintly, not with hunger, not with threat, just acknowledgement. As if to say, "I remember, too."